Bismillah. I need to turn this down.
No, you're good.
It's kind of loud, but
All right, just in case you need the battery goes out.
my name is Brother Trent Light. I am on the committee of the Masjid Mukminoon Health and Wellness Committee, and today's Taaleem is subject is the black man's trauma, its effect, and how to overcome it. Today is January 18th, 2026. And this presentation is really a high-level presentation based upon a TEDx presentation that was given by a black psychologist. I should document it because I used his speaking points. But we're basically going to cover, the trauma, what it is, the effects of trauma on the black man living here in America, and then how to overcome it. Okay. So the idea is really to understand the psychological, social, and healing processes due to trauma experienced by black men. Okay? So what is trauma? Trauma is an emotional response to deeply stressful or painful experiences. It can be caused by a singular event or by chronic repeated stress. And black men often experience both direct and race-based trauma. Direct trauma by just being in a situation where trauma comes at you, whether it's a crime or some other event, or it could be race-based trauma. Trauma that you experience based upon being racial profiled or being directly what's the right word? Negatively impacted by somebody's speech to you, somebody's hand gestures, what have you. Okay. So it's a broad term, but I wanted to kind of put that out there to define what trauma is, kind of set a baseline. The next sheet in the presentation talks about the brain. It's kind of an interesting slide I thought I put in here. It talks about the different parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. So the first line there talks about a non-traumatized brain. Notice the size of the circles of each of these parts of the brain and how they're fairly normal. Okay, so a non-traumatized brain is a normal brain, so to speak. A traumatized brain, however, has an impact to decrease the prefrontal cortex, the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, the hippocampus part of the brain. You can see how it's smaller than the ones up top. But then the amygdala is expanded. Okay, it's just very, very large, and that's the part of the brain that's affected by trauma the most. So just kind of how that affects the brain. Next slide. And after we have this presentation, we'll have some dialogue, and we can talk about our experience and how we dealt with trauma. We all have different ways of dealing with it. Some good, some not so good. The roots of black trauma. So historical and generation trauma. Being African Americans, our descendants being over here from Africa as slaves back in the as early as the 1600s, sometimes even earlier. I'm reading a book right now called Black AF History, which talks about slaves being brought in the 1400s. And how African Americans were here in North America and specifically Mexico in the 1400s. Impacts from slavery and systematic oppression. So you can only imagine the generational trauma of our ancestors who were brought here against their will. Some made the crossing, some didn't, but the impact of that trauma they experienced, and all of a sudden come to a new land, new language, and being subjected to oppression that really systematically continues today in our everyday life. We experience that, we all have. Trauma can be normalized in environments with long histories of oppression. So you look at the black community, look at other communities who experience oppression. That oppression can be normalized as being, hey, this is okay, right? This is what we do, and this is normalized. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That trauma can be normalized in environments with long histories of oppression. I think you look at any society when there's been a long period of oppression, that oppression gets normalized. Like this is the way it is, right? Can't change it. It's been like this before I was born. It's been like this after I was born, kind of thing. And then trauma can be passed down through beliefs. I'm gonna tough it out. I don't feel, right? Just negating your feelings that you have, suppressing your emotional processing, right? How you deal with that, that trauma that's coming, how do you process that? And we all have different ways of processing that trauma. The next slide talks about everyday racial stress and microaggressions. I think this is interesting. Microaggressions are repeated daily stressors that cumulatively create trauma. So it's just being in the grocery store, maybe being stared at. I was at the grocery store yesterday, and a white woman just stared at me, as I was coming up behind them, like I was going to do something, I said, "Hey, how you doing?" "I'm fine." But she just stared at me. As I walked away, the couple just kind of stared at me. I get that a lot because of my size. I get people just stare at me for no reason. Stare at you and look at you, And we've all experienced that. If you're in a non-mixed environment or a predominantly white environment, you'll get that. So staring at you is a microaggression that I think we've all experienced. Why are you here? You shouldn't be here, that kind of thing. Other microaggressions I've experienced at work, working in corporate America, speaking up for myself, having an opinion when I should be really like, why are you even opinion? Your opinions that count, And they'll say slight things, to you as a result of that. So we experience that, in everyday life, going to the post office, going to the grocery store, going to get your driver's license, if you think about it, we probably experience microaggressions so often, we just kind of pass through us. At least for me, it does. I just don't even recognize. I just kind of keep doing what I got to do. I don't stop to acknowledge that microaggression. Certainly don't say anything about it unless I'm confronted with, a very serious microaggression. Then I'll comment. So encounters like, policing, being marginalized in this world, in the workplace, that invalidates stress response triggers, that invalidate stress responses, trigger chronic stress, right? So it kind of keeps building up and building up and building up. So all of a sudden we lash out. We've seen cases of this where people just, I've had enough, and for whatever reason, people take action, sometimes violent actions, on those stresses that build up. That have built up in that person. They have no outlet. They have no idea what's going on. They don't seek help. There's no family members to talk to or no close friends to talk about what they're going through to kind of help them kind of process the trauma that they're going on. And then lastly on this page, these experiences activate continuous fight or flight, right? I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna run, right? Neurological states, right? That's kind of a basic flight or fight, right? And so trauma and these racial stresses and microaggressions can build up, and we see it every day, right? We see people of all races, but particularly in the African American community, who will just fight and don't care, or just flee, right? Run, right? From those from these racial stresses they occur on a daily basis, and it occurs on a daily basis. We might not know it. Some of us are I kind of discount it a lot, when I probably shouldn't, because I've experienced so much. I just let it go. I'm not going to address it, right? So anyways, daily racial stresses and microaggressions is a significant part of the trauma that black men experience. So how does trauma show up in black men? Emotional suppression, anger, and hypervigilance, right? We just suppress it until we blow up. Something triggers us and boom, we go off, right? Anger, getting angry, being angry all the time. Not even angry at family members, even though they haven't caused the trauma, but taking the microaggression and stress, taking it out on our family members, our close friends, our loved ones, okay? And the hypervigilance, just kind of being, proactive in trying to, how do I say this? Anticipate, and it's being ready for it, right? Going to the environment, okay, it's going to happen, right? I know something's going to happen, and just be ready for that. And what happens, boom, we burst out in anger. Opposite of that is really the isolation and difficulty in forming trust with people, right? We isolate. We get, we just go into our own hole, go into our own home, isolate one way or another. We have hard times forming trust with people, for people that maybe don't look like us. I don't trust them because when I was in this environment before, this happened to me, right? So that's going to happen because I'm dealing with the same type of people. That's going to happen to me too, right? So we have that difficulty in forming trust. And then the big ones: depression, anxiety, PTSD-like syndromes, and then that manifests itself into maybe alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sex abuse, or being a sexaholic kind of thing, just, taking that aggression, that frustration out on something, right, that we're faced with. And then, of course, this misdirection of strength, really not showing the pain, right? We have this pain that builds up in us, but we don't want to show it, right? I'm strong, it gets back to that we talked about earlier. Just not showing that pain. And probably the biggest thing is just discounting that pain that we have, right? So if we all think about times in our lives where we've been in a stressful situation and have had, racial bias expressed against us, whether it's overt or it's a microaggression, that stuff builds up, and we just want to discount it, right? And not feel that pain that goes along with that, although we've been hurt, So, and this little note here, there are common patterns reported in trauma research and black male mental health discourse. So again, this is a pattern that we see with in black men. So what does trauma cost us in our lives? And here's a couple of bullet points that were expressed. The man up culture. Man up, overcome it, discount it. Man up, be a man, don't worry about it. This man up culture leads to denial of emotional reality, right? Making symptoms worse, blocking the pain that we have, man up, if you will, overcome it, be a man. It makes things worse, right? Has the opposite effect of this quote unquote man up culture. Internalized stigma prevents seeking help, right? I know personally, and I've had certain challenges in my life, I've sought help, through institutions, through individuals, doctors, right? We get sick, what do? We go to the doctor, right? Well, we have these microaggressions, we have these biases that come across us. Do we see a psychologist, Who do we see? Do we talk to other men about it, or do we kind of just suppress it? Physical aspects, stress-related illnesses, hypertension, blood pressure, cancer. I mean, all these things are a result of suppressing the trauma that we've experienced, and it impacts us. We might not see it, but then it does affect us, right? And it comes out in different forms. And then pain hidden is pain prolonged, right? Good point. We hide that pain that we have. We always have a smile. I'm always good. Hey, I'm good. I'm happy. But inside we've got this pain that's kind of just resonating within us. Which leads us to explode when something happens. We never know when that happened. I've had situations where I thought I was good, and somebody says something to me the wrong way or look at me the wrong way. I just go off. And then I have to suffer the consequences of doing that. So anyways, I think, the police and the police brutality and the police biases, have taught me anyway that when I interact with a police officer, I'm so totally compliant because I don't want to take anything away. I have my driver's license and my insurance card here, ready to give to them, Right. Put my wallet on the wall, put my hands on the dashboard, cabin to them, so they can see my hands, that kind of thing, just try, take the ticket and move on, right? If I was, in the wrong, I'm not trying to fight them, I'm not trying to argue with them, just do it, So, there are techniques that we use. We all have our own techniques to deal with the trauma that we experience, and the point of this presentation is to seek out healthy ways to deal with your depression, and suppression of anger, and the trauma that comes along with it. Pathways to healing. So some strategies that are mentioned in the TED Talk is just recognition and acknowledgement of trauma. That's the first step. Just recognizing and acknowledging, I've got trauma somewhere, right? Some of us have trauma that started in the home. I know my trauma started in my home growing up, I'm not going to go into details of that, but, it was some trauma, right? And I think we all can look back at our childhood and see trauma, people lashing out at us, people not being there, being abandoned, abandonment's a big one, right? Just people just leaving, you're a child and somebody leaves, that can cause some trauma. Recognizing and acknowledging trauma is really the first step. Safe emotional expressing, right? Writing your feelings, getting counselor, going to peer groups. I've done that, in a lot of different areas. I've gone to treatment for just not treatment per se, but I've gone to peer groups, when to deal with the trauma, you know, and some things that I was doing in my personal life, years ago, caused me to seek treatment, to get in these peer groups so that I could, to deal with that anger, because what I was dealing with and anger were kind of intertwined, right? And I was, lucky enough to find some people who took the time to understand what I was going through and help me work through that trauma that I experienced. Therapy, mental health care, culturally competent support improves outcomes, right? So when I was going through some trauma, I went to go see a psychiatrist, just to deal with some issues that I got going on, Black man, psychologist, helped me immensely in moving forward and moving through the pain that I was experiencing. I really didn't know I was depressed or had trauma, and he's the one that brought it up, right? And then talked about what we're talking about today. So at any event, getting therapy, don't be ashamed of it. People do it every day, Find the right mental health care provider that you can relate to, that can help you, and that will help you support and improve your outcomes. And in conclusion, a call to action, Trauma is real, it's pervasive, and it's shaped by social systems, right? We've seen throughout history how different groups of people have been ostracized, alienated, and the trauma that ensues and the impact of that in that society. Healing involves strength with vulnerability, not without it, right? You got to be vulnerable to what's happened to you, understand what's happened to you in order to get to the healing to the healing part. And then the journey is personal, right? And we all have our different trauma. We didn't all grow up together, in the same environment. We all have different experiences. We're at different ages, different stages in our life. It's collective and it's ongoing, right? So, I implore everyone here, if you haven't, taken that journey, and I think most of us probably have, but if you haven't, and if you have some things that have come up lately, just kind of seek the support you need, whether it's through your religious leaders, whether it's through, behavioral professionalists, psychologists, what have you. I implore you to get the help that you need to go through and work through that trauma that's built up over years. Okay? And then lastly, a call to action, right? We got to do something, right? Call to action. So with that, I'll open up the floor, and thank you very much for letting me give this presentation. Hopefully it was beneficial and to you, and thank you. Okay, we'll take some questions, and feel free to talk about anything that somebody else can relate to, right? That you might have experienced and how you got through that.
Testing.
There it is. Yeah, you got it.
Testing. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, assalam.
I think this is a much needed subject to be talked about. And to solve a problem, the first thing you have to do is talk about it, acknowledge it. So I think many of us, we are in a state of denial. I don't need this, I'm okay. But in dealing with us, and us as black men, when I say us, I'm talking about black men, it's going to be impossible to talk about this subject matter without talking about slavery, and without talking about the effect of the image in religion, in particular the white image. And that's going back to a slave master, white, the savior who looked just like the slave master, he's white. I don't think we have time to deal with the detail, but for black men, we have to talk about those things, how that have affected us. And then many of us, as you stated, right, in the house, daddy is an alcoholic, mama alcoholic. That don't help the matter, that make it worse. And sometimes we are a product of a family where everybody drink except us. And then it's the same way with education. You're the only one in the family that's educated. Everybody else didn't even make it through high school. So there are situations that would cause us to be different because of that situation, but that slavery and that image on the cross has affected all of us, but in particular black men, different than any other mean than any other people, because that slavery was over 400 years. And that image is seen everywhere. You can't even escape it. You can go anywhere you want to. You can't escape that image everywhere you go. So again, acknowledgement is the first step in my opinion. And fanning it don't make it go away. We have to talk about it. And I think another one is the wrong definition or the wrong meaning of man. And this is something I'm constantly explaining to the youth all the time, the teenagers. This concept, man, somebody with a wide back, big arm, big chest, got plenty of women, you know, and they have translated even man to mean to have a gun. So I think that we have to go back to what is the meaning of man, because so many of these youth, they don't have a clue what a real meaning of a man, and maybe in their household they have not seen an example of a man. So how you gonna be a man when you don't have a clue what that is, or what you perceive as a man is a long way different than what the true meaning of a man. So these simple words like man, manhood, womanhood, father, simple term, but people have the false concept and wrong concept. So I think we have to go back to some basic terms and basic definition. And again, as we travel, we see it stronger over here, less over here, but everywhere we go, we see it. And we can't be in a state of denial. And it's ongoing, so that means that we have to be ongoing. My last statement I want to make, if you look at military movies where soldiers are coming home, they've been away from home a long time. The only life they know is that of a soldier. Guns, bombs, tanks. When they come back home, what they do, they debrief them. 400 years of slavery, we were never asked to get on the couch and be debriefed. The only thing we was told, you're free. Free to do what? I don't even know what to do. Free, yes, just go. You're free. And I think that that process, that was in place, that had to happen, we would have less of this trauma. But saying you free, no debriefing you, no setting you on the couch, no asking questions, but yet they got soldiers there go over just for a short period of time, sometimes 2 months, and they bring him back. They say, we better debrief him because he's a time bomb, ready to go off, so he need to be debriefed. So that process never happened to us.
Right. Thank you, Mom. Who's next?
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, son.
Trent, I wonder if you could go over where it says microaggressions are repeated daily stresses that cumulatively create trauma. Go over that. Give your example, because when you gave the example, I had something in mind, but I kind of lost it.
Well, it's people making slights to you, right? About you, to you, and about you. So you might have some dress on, or your glasses, or think of a kid who probably had a little child who didn't have the proper fitting clothes, so he's made fun of, But microaggressions, like in the grocery store, right? And you're checking out, and the cashier might, see some soul food, and make a comment, oh, bet this is good, kind of thing. Or even people just talking to you about, your appearance, making a slight to you. Maybe it's not a good example. I just look at
You've done good enough.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just any kind of slight that somebody.
Oh, 4 eyes.
Huh? Right, 4 eyes, right? It's a slight, kind of thing. And like for me, I always call. I bet you play basketball. I never played basketball. I was a swimmer, but I bet you play basketball. I know I didn't. And so they would never know that, but they make that assumption. I did play basketball. Yeah.
I got you. Because what it did, it made me think about this. This is back in 2019, when right before pandemic came in. I was on a flight. I think I was coming back from New Jersey, and I sat next to this couple that I think the woman she looked like an Indian, East Indian, and her husband was Chinese, and I had an aisle seat next to them, and I sat down, and they act like they didn't want me to sit there. You know what I mean? And it got to a point where they actually told me, "Why are you sitting here?" You know what I mean? And and they said, "You're too big to be sitting here." Well, I mean, if I weighed 400 pounds, I could see that. You know what I mean? And I fully realize that I'm a little bit overweight. You know what I'm saying? But what is this? You know what I'm saying? So eventually, I put up such a fuss about it till the flight attendant came back there and asked, well, what was the problem? And, I said, well, these people seem to be uncomfortable with me sitting next to them. I said, I paid for this seat, you know what I mean? And so she said, well, then we'll have to get you another seat. And I wanted to protest about it because I'm not the one that was complaining, they were. But rather than, go through the usual stuff that we go through, with these people, I just voluntarily took another seat, you know what I mean? But I really felt bad about making that decision, but I know that if I had protested, I was going to go through some stuff, and I didn't want to do that, create a scene or nothing like that,
I would want that more of a macroaggression versus a microaggression because I had experienced that before. If they're real uncomfortable when I sit down next to them in an airplane. I remember, after 9/11, I was still traveling, right?
Right.
And every time I got get ready to board the flight, they pulled me over here. I already had it out. I said, here, my passport,
Right.
driver's license, okay? They looked at me, okay, so we can go ahead. So, just getting stopped and getting carded for whatever reason, it's not necessary, right? That's a microaggression, so to speak. Go ahead, Ron.
And when you explain microaggression, we allow the reverse thing to happen. In the sense, these people done been through, the people that got you in a microaggression, they've been through some things too. So your perception may be that they're looking at you that way. And, even to the point where don't let people reset you or give you their narrative of how you should be. Perception, everyone got one. So in the interfaith, we was in the interfaith. So in the interfaith, all of us was going to, the Christian, the Muslim, and the Jews going to talk about Abraham. One of the Christians said, I don't know too much about Abraham because we talk about Jesus so much. So the key is learn the narrative of Abraham. Abraham was called the father of faith because all the faith came through him. So basically now, scriptural perception that covers everybody, no matter if you're atheist. So from that point, you have to approach people that you got the better narrative to approach people with because you ain't dealing with color. Especially us being Muslim, we don't deal with color. So I hear black, 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 and yes, we know slavery had a situation, but most people in the world was in slavery. Not to the degree that we was, but most people was in slavery. And slavery ain't a bad name, ain't a bad word. It's just the degree we was in slavery, we look at it as bad. And we all are slaves to Allah. So now we got to raise the bar. Quit looking at things personal and take it impersonal because even though they talking about a situation, they ain't talking about you. You just fit some of the narrative of that situation. So now we got to learn how to communicate because that's the whole thing. And Imam Muhammad gave us language. Words make people. Everything in creation is a word. So stay with the subject matter of what you're talking about, and don't go for some, because some Christians have their favorite parable. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go to that because they can explain that good. Some Muslim got a favorite that they'll go to that. No, stay within the subject matter and you'll get things done, even if it's accusing of yourself. That's what it said in the Quran. Bear witness even if it's against your own soul. So these are the things when we are talking to people and you think people looking at you a certain way, how you think, reverse it, and you'll see that y'all in the same boat. Get to know each other as human beings.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm enjoying this. I think the trauma, from my part, was inferiority. Long as you see somebody great or better than you or higher than you, and you always looking up to them, and you put their worth over your worth, and God said we one and the same. We all, and once you get to me, once I got past that, then trauma, I can deal with trauma because I can. People, most of us will be basically the same. And inferiority is one thing that this world have put on us, and a stigma they put on us, make us think that somebody better than somebody else. Pharaoh fell because of that. He lost his kingdom because he thought he was better than Moses' people. God said we all one. And he said, he never said he created a white man or a black man. He said he created us human beings. And human beings supposed to love each other better than the animals love each other. But the animals know they're animals. The human being don't realize what is the quality of what make a human being a human being. And once human beings realize that what a human being supposed to be by, he good character, he clean, a good family man, he treat everybody right, he don't steal, he don't lie. That's the part of the Ten Commandments. He try to, and the main thing, he don't make nothing in his life other than God, that who he can't see as his creator. If the scripture said we all gonna die and return to God, then that's what make us equal. We'll never be equal. You got $100,000, I only got $10. So we have to realize what equal means, that we equally going back to the one who started the life. We know mother and father came together, but God said his word that said be, and we all came from that into the world for what? To be tested. Because we all passing through. There's no internal life. There's no internal life. There's life after death, like there's life after sleep. You're gonna wake up in another situation. God done told us that. Now we don't believe that. That you have that right. We have that right not to believe anything that what we want to believe. But common sense said God had put scripture here and a manual here, just like they put a manual in a car to tell you how to operate that car and how to make that car last longer when they change the oil. God had put the same type of manual and tell us how we qualify to get back to the kingdom. And that qualification calls us to be a human being. And if we want to make it higher than a human being, we say a Muslim. Because nothing higher than a person who submits their will to do the will of God but a Muslim. There's no higher than that. A Muslim, a true believer. And Allah said He's going to judge us by our works. And a true believer going to do good works. So that's what I get out of this trauma. I'm sure Donald Trump got plenty of trauma and bringing trauma. And bringing a lot of trauma on people who don't have it. But that's his job. And he's on his job. Well, She fit the category. So we thank you for bringing that to us. It makes sense. Well, I'm sorry there's not 100,000 of us in here to get cure and start working on the cure of the problem that we have, because there is a cure to the problem that we have. We know it's the Quran. We know the final revelation, right? Jesus said we're going to come after him and lead us in all truth. And you know he's going to bring about a book. He didn't come without the word, and the word is in the Quran. So I thank you for bringing that to us. I'm sorry there's not a whole lot of people here, but like the brother said, can't worry about that. Whosoever will, let them come.
Assalamu alaikum. I wanted to also add to the concept of microaggressions, as even though they're small, they may have bigger impact than the greater aggressions, in the sense that because of their subtlety, and you'll tend to overlook things that you don't necessarily perceive right away. But when I think of those microaggressions, I think of the things that come on that might be a joke, that seems kind of, but it's a joke, that kind of goes against you. You feel it, or you might hear a song, or you might see something, another TV show, or something that just has something that has real subtle. It's just in the background. And I think the microaggressions have a greater impact on the psyche because they're so under the radar, so to speak, and then have the same impact. So I think that's important. And also believe that, as what the brother said, that the Quran really, we even say it in our Fatiha, your aid do we seek. So not to say don't go to a healthcare professional, but they're not the deciding factor in the whole big picture, in my opinion. I still have to run whatever they say, and whatever they say, it has to still come through the light of Quran for me personally, and I think most of us feel that way. So that being said, it's just a moral dynamic, and also in order to see it in a very balanced picture, is to also realize the ones that's doing the harm have also been harmed. That's how they got in that position to begin with, to even think without it. Very important to see that. Otherwise, we can't have the proper compassion in a balanced way, so we don't put all the blame on the individual that's also a victim. So it's the brains, that's the main point.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Brother Najee from Chattanooga, Tennessee, Masjid Muhammad. It's an honor to be here around you brothers with so much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. I did 18 years in prison, and there's two things I noticed that I had to drop after I got out back into civilization. One was like, man, as a man, I can fix anything. And the other one was was that it's my way or the highway. And then the third one, I said too, but the third one, the most important one, was like in the black community, like you don't have to call the police. Like because we can fix everything ourselves. We don't need the police like that. And that's not true. Sometimes I had to call the police on one of my wives. cause I'm like, I can't deal with this. You can't put your hands on them. You can't do nothing. So I'm calling the police. Like, yeah, come and something like that. So it's a lot of things. Like you can't like you said, psychologically that's going on. Like Brother Furqan said, we didn't get debriefed, and especially coming out of prison, there's another debriefment, and then like for us African Americans, we come to Islam with baggage, and so we need debriefing on that. And because like we got a class going on in Chattanooga, it's called Akida, and it's dealing with the principles of Akida, which and you think about it, the companions during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for 14 years, that's all they talked about was Akida.
Can you explain what Akida is?
Akida, can you explain that better, Imam?
Your Akida is dealing with your manners, how you do something. And if you study Al-Islam, it's constantly telling you how to deal with God, how to deal with the devil, how to deal with your mother, how to deal with your neighbors, how to deal with your enemy. All of this is Akida, which also make a part of your belief system. Because if that's wrong, then you can't expect for good to come out of your wrong method. So throughout Quran, Allah is always giving us proper approach. You know, if you study the history of Musa alayhi salam, when Allah sent him to Pharaoh, he told him, say a kind word. Don't be a copy of what he's doing, you know. And I think somebody had mentioned that sometime you acting just like the enemy that you talking about. So again, our manners mean so much because you don't get a second chance to give a first impression. And the first impression is a lasting one.
And so like in Chattanooga I live on this street called Fagan Street, and I realized that, you know, my identity as Muslim, and they know me as like either the guy that went to prison or the guy that goes to work. You know what I'm saying? So and I offer all them guys a job. I said, come work with me, and they like, no, I can't do that. So so the street I live on, you know, if they got a police camera on your street, that means people shooting guns, right? So like that's another emotional stressor that we deal with is gunshots. You know, when we hear gunshots, we think nothing of it, you know. And but on my street, I got 2 gun cameras on my street, one on one end, one on the other, you know. So that's highly stressful on my street. You know what I'm saying? And like, there was one incident where this guy got shot. I'm sleeping in my bed, pop, pop, pop. I heard 3 shots. I woke up. I go outside. People over there, like, over the guy. They not rendering, you know, first aid, 911. They taking stuff out of his pocket. And my neighbor went over there and said, man, I went over there to see who it was. And the first thing click in my mind, you didn't help him? Like that. And so that right there, like so I just made the decision, like, I'm gone. You know, y'all don't want to change, y'all don't want to do nothing. So that right there, you know, that was a stressful event, like that's it, man. You know, I'm out of here. You know. So
Do you experience much racial profiling being in your profession? You know, microaggressions being the person you drive around Chattanooga?
well, you can you can tell the whites that think they know it all, and you know what they say in the workplaces. You know, when men get together, they have a peeing contest, brag about that they know this, they know that, they did this, they did that. So that's just a normal thing that, you know, we overlook. But as far as like the African Americans, when we get together, you know, people jug, you know, they might jug with each other. That means joke, you know, like, and so that's felt like a normal thing that people's gonna do anyway. You know, like you had your class clown and, you know, the fool in school that's always acting the fool, you know, with jugging and joking with people. So, you know, you got those people like that. But I give an example similar to yours, like this hat I got on. If I wear the Islam in the front, people look and turn away. But if I turn it in the back and I turn around and look, they staring. So and that's the funny thing about this. I noticed it in Walmart, and I you know, alhamdulillah, you know, it's so that's some weird stuff, but alhamdulillah.
Well, great. Well, listen, we'll end it up here. I think it's been a great discussion. Hopefully, has some food for thought. Think about things, and I appreciate everybody's, you know, good contribution. And we will have, because of Ramadan coming up, I think we're gonna skip over the next holiday for February. I think it comes on the third February, third Saturday. Prepare to take us out.
Yeah, I will close with dua. But Ron would mention the nafs, and that put a lot of emphasis on yourself. And a lot of time we do more work on the person outside of ourselves rather than the person in the mirror. And so this is we're dealing with our mental, spiritual weaknesses. We talk about a voice inside of us. It's a pretty lengthy thing to deal with, but the main thing that NAFs teach us to deal with your own self before you deal with someone else. And a lot of us spending too much time concerning someone else and skip the man in the mirror. And that's the most important person, is that man in the mirror. And Allah has given us something inside of us that actually tell us like an alarm that that's not right, that that's wrong. And Imam Muhammad made clear to us that when it goes off the first time, it's the loudest that it's going to get. It's not going to get any louder. That after that, it's going to start getting lower and lower and lower. And pretty soon, you don't even hear it, because why? You ain't paying attention to it. So why we do the opposite? We get louder. But that inside of us, it don't do that. First time, the highest volume is going to go, and pretty soon, it's not even talking to you. Yeah, but that's a good subject. He mentioned that because there's 3 of them, and they all is dealing with your own self. So alhamdulillah.
You find it in the term of rubabiyyah. Rubabiyyah, you'll find the 3 nafs.
So again, quite interesting subject, timely subject, meaning that we can't do this in 30 minutes or not. We can come again and again and again. So alhamdulillah, let us close with dua. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bil sabr.